PNC is proud to support Business Forward, where community leaders discuss the issues confronting business in Central Illinois.
Welcome to Business Forward. I am your host, Matt George. Joining me tonight, a friend of mine, Tony DeDante. Tony is a C-suite exec and one of the top executive coaches I know, a thought leader. I love it. Thank you for coming on. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well,
more than you know.
I appreciate it. This is cool. So, you have worked for some really, really big time brands, and when you talk about some of the, people use the term Fortune 500, but you worked for Fortune 100 brands and at a high level, high positions. So when you talk about some of the brands like Harley Davidson and Mattel, I mean, you worked hand in hand with both of those companies, didn't you?
Absolutely. I started off at Harley Davidson in charge of organizational change, went on to head up HR. Got some great stories there for, everybody thinks they're limited by their title or something. I know for me, it's like, I think it was like the first 3 weeks in Harley Davidson, I was walking the floor. I'm a real-time biker, one of those 1%er guys, so I just love the opportunity, what the brand represented. It's on my skin everywhere. So I was able to find a $64 million problem that they had not been able to solve for 2 years. And I wasn't out looking for problems. But as I'm walking the assembly line, I'm looking at things saying, okay, this isn't right. This business can't meet demand. So every time they get it wrong, not only does it piss off a current rider, but it pisses off a new rider who's buying a new bike, right? So I started to look at that, and all of a sudden I find this huge problem. Harley had something interesting. They had a 1,600-mile assembly line. So they built all the fiberglass parts way up in upper Wisconsin. They shipped those down to York, Pennsylvania, where that particular bike with that particular color fiberglass had that would meet up with this engine and transmission, and then it would be shipped to York, Pennsylvania, where it got assembled. So anywhere along that line, if anything on that particular bike was wrong, they would take that bike, which is already sold, and put it in a hospital to basically steal parts from. So all that time and effort, 1,600 miles, could go away with one fiberglass scratch.
Wow.
So there was a metric called float. While I was there, I was able to bring that float number down from 22 a month to 1. So I'm the HR guy. So now I'm redefining what human resources is, redefining what being a business partner is. And that was the start of my world. And so every place I've gone into HR, I have been equally as good a business person as the CEO or the chief marketing person or the CFO. And that's how I built agency.
I think that's what separates you. It makes you unique, because if you think about it, a typical HR person, even in a C-suite, will sit there and worry about, I've got to worry about all of the duties related just to that department, including retaining and bringing in new employees, training, and so on. But that's, in talking to you here, especially in this past month, you did this at every company. So
every company.
Yeah. And so when you were there at Harley Davidson, I just want to stick with this brand just for a second, because what I find interesting about a brand like Harley Davidson is just a certain type of person rides a bike like that, or a certain type of buyer, let's say, not person. So you're buying that type of bike very differently than you're buying someone that's buying a BMW, very differently than someone's buying an Indian motorcycle. So when you look at that type of branding, did you ever just sit there and kind of from a business sense go, man, I just work at at a pretty cool place. And think that as you're doing that along your whole career.
I did at Harley because when I got there, I never realized one thing. I was a minority. The real hardcore bikers are few and far between, and they make up a minority, right? But the real business of Harley Davidson is in motor clothes. It's in clothes and accessories and style because Harley represents a brand where the president of a company can go out, put a do-rag on or whatever, and they can pretend they're a badass. And that's what they are. So they get to do it. They get to live out this thing. They get to ride with the outlaws and the real hardcore guys like me. But they got nothing to do with that. They just want to party and they want to be in this that's their hobby.
Right.
And Mattel was able to, Harley was able to, grow that motor clothes thing to almost a third or more of its business.
Which most people don't think about. Like, I'm glad you brought that up because that actually is a piece of business that really drives the whole bottom line of a company like that, which is crazy, but that's the core of how important a brand is.
Yeah, Harley Davidson, the purpose of Harley Davidson is not to make the one percenters like me happy. We love it. We live it. It's to give everybody a chance to live out a different dream. and they get to do it. And they get to go places like Sturgis where a town of 3,000 sees 700,000 motorcycles in a weekend.
Yeah.
They get to experience that. And it's all about the customer experience.
Yeah. And you also were with Mattel. And when I think of Mattel, I do think of Hot Wheels, and I think of those, what boy didn't have them, right? What kid did not have them? But you were actually charged with that line. Tell us about that, because that's just a kind of a fun dream job.
Yeah, I was recruited into into Mattel. My boss, Alan Kay, saw me at a conference, offered me a job at a conference. He just started there. He came over from IBM and he needed somebody who understood global HR. So I'd been working around the world, living around the world, and he hired me. And Mattel at the time had a huge business problem, which was Wall Street was saying to them that 70% of their revenue was coming from the United States when it needed to come from across the ponds. So I was given the job. How are you going to work that, Tony? So that is a much different orientation than any other HR person.
Right.
So I went on the road in all these different countries, and I did executive assessments in every country. We ended up letting go a lot of good people, but not the level of the quality of athlete that I was used to. And then we brought in people with no toy experience. So in other words, I went out and found the best finance person from the best company out there, the best Six Sigma company, best Six Sigma person from GE, or the best marketing person from Nestle. And I brought them in because they had superior knowledge of their world, and they knew the country that they were going to go take over. Here's what's interesting. 11 months later, after doing this and implementing this culture process, which I still use today, by the way, there is that 70-30 split reversed.
Huh.
In 11 months, and the stock took off. So I got a lot of credit for that. Not only that, but I got credit for creating the links of communication between each country and the home office, which never was there before. In the past, like it is with most companies, by the time information gets from the bottom to the CEO, it's 70 to 80% diluted.
I believe
because
that.
people don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to feel like they're failing or anything. So I put in a cultural audit process, which basically said, we're going to change that overnight, and we're going to create the mechanism for you to talk to each other. And I would give them the topics, and then over time, that became perfect.
Huh.
Like it wasn't a meeting. It's like you needed to talk to this person in Brazil. Otherwise, you could never explain your business to a customer. And as soon as Walmart and our big customers started to grow and grow and grow, we all needed to be on the same page in order to leverage the brand strength. And I was able to do that. So when I was at Mattel and I had virtually done every job in HR, including some huge M&A deals, they offered me to go run this thing in the NASCAR world, which I knew nothing about. But here's one of the tenets of organizational change that people forget, Matt, is that change happens on the periphery much better than it does in a home office. So I was going to be 3,000 miles away from the home office if I could get away with a lot of stuff. So as I sat there rethinking my strategy, I said, you know what? I don't know anything about NASCAR, but I sure know a lot about football. I know how to be a general manager in football. So I went at it with a general manager mindset. I start recruiting drivers, doing my homework on drivers, and then going out and cutting big deals with the best owners. So within the first 4 years, Mattel, who had been spending unbelievable amounts of money and getting very little return on it, now saw 2 world championships come on board. And those 2 world championships brought agency to the brand with Walmart, with Target. And all of a sudden, Hot Wheels fit. The brand definition fit. We're in NASCAR. We're kicking butt. We're winning championships. And now all these things they never even dreamed of, all this cross branding and cross marketing branding, everything happened. And I'm at the heart of it. So I'm so thankful for my bosses at Mattel for giving me that opportunity.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to switch gears here because a lot of people talk about Steve Jobs and they know him from Apple, but I'll tell you something interesting. He actually had a quote about you. And so I was really wanting to talk about culture, but we are kind of talking about culture because with Mattel, you changed culture in a very short period of time, because typically they say 3 to 4 years for culture or whatever it may be. You did the same with Harley. But Steve Jobs says, Tony helped me get tuned into the balance necessary between people, talent, and technology. Steve Jobs. So that's pretty impressive, because I'd be honest with you, I don't read much about Steve Jobs talking about anybody other than Steve Jobs.
Yeah. So the way this happened is I had a good friend. He's passed away now. He's CEO of a company, and he knew Steve. He was in the technology business, and he introduced me. And he said, I just want you to meet Steve, and I just want you to listen to him. And that's all. It started with that. It didn't involve anybody else in his company. It didn't involve his HR people. It involved nobody, just him and I meeting offsite and having some of the most incredible, frank discussions you could ever imagine, right? Especially with someone as bright as Steve. And so the thing that I help Steve Jobs with is that it's okay to be brilliant. It's okay to want brilliant people, but it's better to be competent. I call it the ABCs, right? It's better to be competent as a leader, believable as a leader, connected as a leader, and dependable. Those are your ABCDs of leading.
Okay.
That's what I taught Steve. So are you competent? Well, you're competent as far as innovation, but are you competent in leading people? What are your, and I used to ask him this, what are your derailers? What are the things you refuse to admit, but people say to you? And he'd go over it, and I would give him executive coaching like you and I would normally do with anybody else. And pretty soon it became more of a friend issue. Like, do you see that behavior in me? And I'd say yes. And he'd tell me to F off. And I'd say, okay, we're going back to square one. Right. And so, the ABCs, competent, believable, connected, dependable, got him on the same page at the same time to be able to listen to great examples in coaching. And I love the guy.
That's
I never worked
interesting.
for him. I mean, I never, went to work at Apple or anything, but I love the guy because I developed a relationship that I don't think many people had.
Well, I mean, I've read his book. I've read certain things about him over the years. I mean, I can attest just by reading that not too many people got to even have a conversation with him. So that's pretty interesting. Now let's go on to the next thing. You've got so many interesting avenues. I'm just feel like I'm skipping around, but I think they're all important because each one of them that we're talking about has to do with people. And now you're dealing with another brand, Ritz-Carlton. You built a Ritz-Carlton themed pet hotel. What is that about? That's cool and crazy at the same time.
Well, here's what happened. So I'm in Charlotte, and Mattel at that time was having a problem with its products being knocked off in China. And they made a decision to sell the licensing for what I was doing to NASCAR itself and get out of that whole thing. So not sell the brand, but just the licensing. And I was offered a job to go back to home office, which I didn't want to do. I'd already done everything. So I'm sitting there in Charlotte and I look at Judy and I go, what do I love? I mean, I've been working, traveling 90% of the time. I mean, what do I love? She said, your dogs. So at that moment, I thought of the idea of, you know what? I want to build something that not anybody can get into. Anybody can be a dog walker, but not anybody can build a Ritz-Carlton for dogs. So I looked around and found the place right next to Lowe's headquarters, who has 7,000 pet owners in it. And I lived in a Donald Trump subdivision, so it's very ritzy, and it was only a 6-minute drive away. So what did I do? I took off everything else. I became the milkman of old. I wore a tie up here, and I got a little van and I decorated it like a NASCAR. And it had all the dogs, and all I did was keep driving in this 6-mile radius. Every day, no advertising spend or anything. And all of a sudden, it got out. And when it got out, and people said, you have AstroTurf for the dogs, you have massage for the dogs, you have beautiful places for the dogs to play, you don't let in, you actually do an interview of the owner and the dog before you let them in. All of a sudden, people came, right? All the NASCAR friends came. All the doctors came. All of Lowe's came. So now I'm doing the 6 o'clock in the morning, pick up everybody's dog. So if you can imagine driving through this real ritzy neighborhood, all the spouses come out in their nightgowns, hand me their beautiful dog. I put them in the back and I take them over to the staff that I trained. And how did I train them? I took them to the Ritz-Carlton for lunch and I had them watch. What do you see the people at the Ritz-Carlton doing that are making $15 an hour just like you? And I took them through an intervention. That's how I trained them. I trained them how to upsell and how to be incredibly Ritz-Carlton-esque in customer service. And pretty soon, I started getting calls about, would you like to sell your business? Would you like to sell your business? And I couldn't add on to my business. So 5 years later, I sold it for 10x, right? And the reality of that decision was every metric for that industry, just like the hotel industry, heads in the beds was the metric, right? So 39% was the average occupancy. It is for most hotels. I had 95% occupancy.
Wow.
Even during the off seasons. So I took my MBA and my experience running a brand, and I just leapfrogged it into this thing.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, you go back to what you're saying about driving around. I mean, you're talking about a guy who works for brands and knows branding. I think that's what's interesting about you, Tony, is and I wonder in today's age if they've changed the way they kind of title people. Like, even in the C-suite level, right? Because you did CEO work, COO work, the Harley Davidson example, the 64 million's CFO work or comptroller work. Then you're over here doing branding and marketing. Anything with Mattel, I'm guessing, has to do with marketing. I mean, you're sitting here and you're thinking all the time, how do I sit here and expand the brand and everything else? So I think that's pretty interesting about you. And as a coach now, I mean, people can look you up and look you up on LinkedIn and Anthony Dadante, D-A-D-A-N-T-E, and read your profiles, because I think what's interesting about your profiles and then what you post is there's a lot of knowledge in there over the years, and people can get something out of it. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about these brands, because a lot of times you don't get too many people that you get somebody on that has worked with one brand or maybe two. But I mean, you go on to so many other companies that I think it's pretty cool stuff, including Honeywell. Honeywell's another brand. Didn't even mention that.
It's a great brand. You know, but there's a commonality here. The commonality is you can't do anything on your own. Steve Jobs is a perfect example. You have to hire people who are better than you. So in every one of these businesses were people better than me, right? And I was okay with that, because I was, you know me now for a long time.
But you're always,
I want to learn.
You're that guy. You are that guy. So thank you, Tony Dadante, for coming on the show. What a great show. We could keep talking. I appreciate it. I hope the weather's good there in Georgia, and thank you so much for coming on. I'm Matt George, and this is another episode of Business Forward.
Thank you for tuning in to Business Forward, brought to you by PNC.